Well, I think that his team has made very clear afterwards that he was referring to people who referred to Puerto Rico as garbage. So he was trying to basically say that it was the speaker, that comedian, who was garbage. But yeah, this is one more in a long line of gaffes that Joe Biden is famous for making, and that the Harris campaign is probably all too glad to have in the rearview mirror at this point.
Of course, the Trump campaign itself is distancing itself from the comedian's remarks about Puerto Ricans as well. So how are these two things sort of swaying Latino votes? Will that have any impact at all?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of questions right now about Latino votes. Ronald Reagan famously said that they were a demographic ripe for the taking for Republicans. But in reality, I think the Latino vote is far more complex than people may really understand. You know, if you look at the Latino vote in Florida, for example, you have a significant Cuban American population, and they fled a sort of very violent and repressive communist regime. And so they are acutely sensitive to any politician who may be weak in their eyes in terms of their treatment of Cuba. Whereas you have also evangelical Latino voters who are more socially conservative and not exactly keen on more access to abortion. But then you also have progressive Latinos in LA, for example, in California. So it's hard to say exactly how this changes the race, but I would just say that more than anything else, it probably doesn't help Donald Trump. But at this point, more people than not are decided in what they think about Donald Trump and who they want to vote for in this election.
Yes, what's also hard to predict is the outcome of this election, with polls predicting that things are just so close. Where do you see, or what have you observed with the polls so far?
Yeah, I think I and a number of other people can confidently say about this race that we don't know. And I think anyone who says otherwise is probably not being all that truthful, because the polls are too close. And we have two competing dynamics in this race. We have Donald Trump, who has overperformed every single presidential ballot he's ever been on, 2016 and 2020. He both overshot expectations, especially in 2020. We hear about 2016 the most, but actually that polling error in 2016 was in the margin of error. In 2020, the polling error was outside the margin of error, but Biden's polling lead was just enough that it wasn't that Trump wasn't able to overcome it. Now, that's one dynamic. Trump overshooting. The other dynamic is Democrats overshooting their expectations ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned in June 2022. Since mid 2022, Democrats have overshot all of their expectations in the polls, including in the midterms in November in 2022. So that's leading us to not really be sure about who's going to actually be ahead in at the end of this race, given that polls are so close and both sides have overperformed historically.
And obviously, there's lots to do with who comes out to vote or who has already voted in early polling. But Jared, you wrote recently that arguing that there's not many voters for Kamala Harris to win over. Why do you say that?
Yeah, I think at this point, the U.S. Sort of political voters in the U.S. right now are not only just polarized, they're also calcified, right? So you're not seeing a lot of changes in U.S. voting habits, regardless of how momentous some of the events have been in recent U.S. history. We have the COVID, a once in a century pandemic. We have lockdowns. We have a president getting almost assassinated. We have a president being convicted of major crimes. We have a president facing multiple impeachments. But despite all of this, his Donald Trump's approval rating and Democratic intentions have Democratic Party voter intentions have really not changed all that much. So that's one dynamic. That's a calcified electorate. And I think the other thing that I've been trying to highlight is that as much as people may make this out to be a vote between Harris or Trump, a lot of times it is Trump voters asking folks to choose Trump over the couch, and Harris voters asking to choose Harris over the couch. That is, are they going to stay home on election day? Can they be bothered to go to the ballot box on a Tuesday in November? And they're hoping that if they can just convince enough of those voters who aren't really sure if they want to vote but are inclined to vote for that candidate to vote, for them, then November will go well for that party.
Yeah, and in another development, we saw Trump's former aide, Steve Bannon, released from prison. He's going out there as a big voice supporting his former boss. Will that have any sort of impact with 5 days to go?
It's really hard to point to any impact 5 days to go. There's so much noise and so many different things going on. I think one thing we do know for sure is that there seems to be two sort of Trump campaigns. There's Donald Trump himself, where he will have the rambunctious and controversial comedians on stage with him. He will go on a controversial podcast, but then you actually have a far more disciplined and organized Trump campaign run by well-known and accomplished Republican political operatives, and they are running advertisements that are more disciplined and staying on message. So perhaps Bannon joins Donald Trump for a campaign rally, but we know for sure that the other Trump campaign going on right now, the one being run by more conventional political operatives, will have nothing to do with Steve Bannon. He is just not someone that, in their mind, helps them win in this election.
Okay, Jared Mondschein, really good to get your thoughts once again. Thanks very much.
Thank you.